Yo, welcome everyone to another video in this series. Today we're gonna take a look at TRDR, the pioneer when it comes to order book depth and also spotting top levels. Some features that allow TRDR to distinguish itself from the rest, giving it a huge advantage when it comes down to trading and spotting actual liquidity within the market. So without any further ado, let's open our console. And currently you'll see the template that I've created so far, but we're gonna start from scratch. By default, if I remember correctly, this is pretty much the layout that TRDR is gonna give you, including probably the volume as well, which I always tend to remove. And what you are seeing right now on my chart is actually the order book depth overlay. So this is one of the best indicators that you can use when it comes down to trading, because it allows you to visualize the liquidity on your chart in a very easy and simple way. So let's start with that. Let's go to the settings of this indicator, and here on the inputs, the first thing that we see is the depth. So with the depth, we can choose the distance where we want to measure the ratio on our chart. So the settings that I personally use here are greater than or equal to 1% and smaller than 5%, because anything between 0 to 1% is way too close to the price, especially if you're checking other tickers as well, or more volatile markets or more illiquid markets, because you're gonna see a lot of spoofing that is gonna mess up with your order book. And we're choosing smaller than 5% because anything above 5%, especially for the giants like Bitcoin and Ethereum, is gonna be way too far away from current price. Now, I like to leave the opacity cap as it is, but in the ratios, I want to actually see strength, and a ratio of 20 for minimum bids and minimum asks is actually way too low. That's why on the chart you're seeing the overlay being way too sensitive and almost appearing everywhere. So here I'm gonna choose 70 for the bids and 60 for the asks. And just like that, you can see how it actually cleared my chart. A quick tip that I can give you here is that, especially when you're checking spot markets, usually the buyers are going to be much more present than the sellers. So you always want to have the ratio of minimum bids a bit higher than the ratio of minimum asks. But in the futures or perps, this isn't usually the case due to traders being able to also sort the ticker. Now lastly, here we got the overrides. This can be crucial when you're trying to aggregate different exchanges, or when you are trying to force a specific exchange or a specific market type or a specific quote or settlement asset that you believe gives you an edge over the others. So for example, something that I like to do, especially for Bitcoin, is to force market type, and I'm gonna choose spot and I'm gonna choose Binance, because I think Binance gives you one of the cleanest order book depths when it comes to Bitcoin. But again, this is just my personal use case. You can find your own edge if you play around with it. Then we got the style, which is mostly just visual settings. You can change the colors here, something that I like to do, but because when it comes to color I like to take my time and I don't want to waste yours, I'm just gonna leave it as it is for now. And lastly, like any trading view indicator, we got the visibility. So by clicking OK, you can now see the order book depth overlays on the chart more clearly. So a simple way to understand order book overlay just by looking at this is that order book overlay actually helps you to spot real support and real resistance, because it's not based on any price levels. It's not based on any magical lines on your chart. It's based on actual liquidity within the market. When you are seeing bids ratio pop up on a low, that's an actual support. When you see asks ratios being highlighted on the highs, that's your actual resistance. That's where price can actually find resistance. So you can easily see how clear this actually is when it comes to trading. Now moving on, allow me to introduce you to my second favorite indicator from TRDR, the top levels. So just by going to the indicators order book and order book top levels, we just added the order book top levels indicator. And what this indicator actually does is display on the chart the large resting limit orders that currently exist within the books. This again can be very useful when you're trying to understand the behavior of whales. A lot of times you will see large resting limit orders hovering around price when it comes to significant level. And because currently I can't see a clear example, let me change the time frame real quick and let me play around with its settings. So again, you can set up the price range. For this scenario, I'm not going to touch this, but you can also choose how large you want the orders to actually be before they get displayed on your chart. So in this case, I'm gonna choose 100k, and you can select the level range. So I'm gonna choose to only see the top 3 largest orders. You also get the continuation, which is something that TRDR added recently to help out with spoofing. So now you can choose for how long you want the level to have been active before it gets shown on the chart. So what I also like to do here is choose 30 and move this to a minute. So what we now did with this is that we are now seeing orders that have been active for more than 30 minutes. And again, you can override and choose a specific market. This can be useful, as mentioned before, to aggregate markets, especially for the top levels, because there isn't currently an aggregated indicator for this specific future. Again, you can change the style, which I'm not gonna bother you with, and just like that we see where whales are interested in jumping into the action. Now, a last indicator that I like to use is order book depth again, but this time instead of overlaying on the chart, I like to have it separately and with aggregation. So with this indicator we can aggregate everything available on TRDR. Again, you can choose your depth. I like to keep it the same as the overlay, and I also prefer to deselect any quotes and any markets that I believe screw up my data. Alright, and after doing a little bit of customization, these are my final settings. I forgot to mention that I actually don't follow the same depth as overlay for this one. I prefer to see this on a larger scale, especially since I'm checking so many exchanges and pairs, so these are my favorite settings for this one. And on the style, I change this from bids and asks to delta. For someone who is new with order book depth, a way that you can see this is similarly to overlay. You can actually check the dominance with this. You can check the pressure. So when you are seeing bids spiking up, you know that price is coming down to a support level. And this helps you predict the support levels because you're actually checking the depth in a much greater distance than on the overlay. When you see the depth in the delta here being highlighting the asks, then you know price is getting close to a stop, or you know price is getting close to its local resistance. When you see bids spiking up again, you know that price is gonna be short-term bullish. This can be very great for scalping as well. Now enough with the chart. There are a lot of great things that you can do with it by yourself. If you go and look at the indicators that TRDR is offering, there are plenty of things that you can customize to your likings. I'm just giving you some of my favorite settings. And now TRDR also offers a watch list, the order book depth overview, which I use a lot to check the resting liquidity on all exchanges with a glance. And to me, it's actually insane how easy you can check resting liquidity by just looking at this. You can check it for whatever distance you want, and you can see which exchanges are turning bullish, which exchanges are turning bearish. Then we got the trades, which is showing us the live trades that are coming right now in the books. And then we got the order book that we can also aggregate, and we have the option to change the currency from base to USD. We get the order book changes, also very important, especially for the macro, to see what is happening on each price level, where market participants are stacking or pulling out orders. Basically, the added section is showing us orders that have been added, and the subtracted section is showing us the total amount of orders that have been pulled within the past 5 minutes. We can also change the time here. A lot of stacked orders coming in recently on specific price levels can show us an interest in market participants offering support or resistance at those levels. Something now that is worth our time a little bit more are the alerts, because they are very customizable. And just as an example, I'm gonna show you the alert that I've made. So here are my settings. Basically, for the longs, I have selected Bitcoin to be grouped in all these markets, Binance, Coinbase and Kraken. For my sources, I've selected the top levels and the order book depth overlay. And on my conditions, you can see that I'm checking for all of these markets that the bids from the order book depth are actually greater than 60, similarly to what we did on the chart, and that there is a top level, aka a large resting limit order within 2% from current price. And here is my configuration. I've chose to get this alert on Discord, in a Discord group chat. There are a lot of formats that you can choose. You can also receive alerts via email, Telegram, sound, pop-up, webhook and speech. And you can also choose the short conditions separately. I've did the same thing by selecting the market, the sources, and then set the conditions just to be on asks in both scenarios. I want asks to be less than -40 and a resting ask limit order to be within 2% of current price. Again, pretty similar configuration. Now to finish this, let's check TRDR screeners. So again, I've played around with this a little bit, that's why this isn't showing anything. But to help you understand this better, here TRDR is checking in real time the whole crypto market. We can sort everything by order book ratio. And what I like to do is also create a watch list for what we are seeing right now. So we're gonna add 30 markets to the watch list. We're gonna hit create a new watch list and we're gonna name this bullish alts, and we just created a watch list that we're gonna check soon. And then we can sort by the altcoins with the most negative ratio, and we're gonna create another watch list. We're gonna name it berries alts. And now we head to our chart and into our watch list. We can see the two new watch lists that have been created from the screeners. And choosing the bullish alts, we can now see everything that seemed to be bullish. And this way we can discover potential opportunities that we can take for intraday trades. Solana, for example, right now seems to be a quite good long because you can see some heavy pressure coming from the bids. There's a lot of resting limit buys at this level. And you also get your top levels that you can use as protection for your orders. Let's also check the bear results. And you will see a lot of times something like this is completely useless. It might be because of the market that we are currently checking. The overlay and the top levels without a forced market is showing us the market that we are currently in. So Binance Spot would be the case. And sometimes alts like this, especially very small alts, tend to get a lot of manipulation. That's why I like to be very picky when it comes down to my alts. And I prefer to use a different template most of the time for my alts. But this can also be a decent example, excluding the overlay, which with its current settings is very sensitive when it comes to alts. You can see with the order book depth aggregations here that, for example, Uni has been quite clear when it came down to shorting it or finding potential support. And you can see the influence of top levels, where sometimes they can snipe or price can get very close to them and then reject, giving you a very clear advantage when you want to take scalp or swing trades. So that's all I'm gonna show you for TRDR for now. This is just the very simple guide that I can give you. TRDR has its own docs, so I would recommend anyone trying it out to read the docs first, because you can find a lot of useful information there on how to use most of the stuff. They're very simple to understand. And don't forget that if you're interested in TRDR, you can check it out by using the link in the description. And if you're hesitant about TRDR being the right tool for you, you can find out which trading tool better suits your needs by taking our free diagnostic test on our website, tradertoolmatch.com, that you can also find in the description. If you get matched with TRDR or any of our selected tools, you'll get a personalized email to help you start over with the tool, giving you some basic tips and a guide. And that's all about today's video. We'll see you in the next one.